Good morning and happy July the 11th, the last day of this decan of Cancer. And it's also the tarot card Abundance with two very cool Goetic spirits, Gusion and Uval. They do such cool things. They're both dukes. And of course, abundance is such a cool card. You're never unhappy to see abundance come up in a tarot reading. Such is July the 11th. Welcome to another installment. Actually, we're getting into the first real installment of Ask Babylon, Answers to Questions of Life and Magic. I hope you're all enjoying your weekend so far. I am. Thank everyone for the nice birthday wishes that I'm getting on Facebook. I'm doing my best to acknowledge every one of those. And I really appreciate it. How did you know it was my birthday? Anyway, the first section of the book are three magazine interviews that ask Babylon, and and the very first one was a magazine interview I did with a Russian magazine way back in it's 10 years ago when I wrote it. So it was a long time ago, maybe close to 20 years ago. And it's called An Interview with American Magician Lon Milo DuQuette. Note, this interview is from about 10 years ago. So this book was compiled 10 years ago, so that's 20 years. The Russian interviewer had recently read the manuscript for my novel, Accidental Christ. And now, if you haven't read Accidental Christ, I think you'd just absolutely love it. The most reasonable priced edition is Kindle at the moment, but the hardbound edition is still available too, and it's really cool. So the magazine first asks, the first question would be this: did you know Anton LaVey? If yes, can you tell me your impressions of him? He seemed demonic and dark. However, according to everything I read about you, you are a very optimistic and pleasant person to be with. Can you tell us more about your personality? Don't get me started. Here's my answer. I never met LaVey, although I know a few people who did. All of them were favorably impressed by his intelligence and, believe it or not, his humor. He artfully used, through a kind of shock therapy, his dark and demonic image to help people free themselves from their unhealthy religious programming. I certainly do not mean in any way to denigrate the memory of LaVey, but I do not view him as an occultist per se. He was a delightful and colorful slap in the face of all religious hypocrisy. He helped many people snap out of the coma of original sin and other unnecessary and unwholesome religious programming. He was a great showman, and he did his job very well and with great style. I miss him. I'm going to move my microphone just a little bit closer here. The second question. What is the usual day of a magician? Do you start it with some spells, curses, and magical tricks, as some common people think? Now remember, this is 20 years ago. When you think about it, all life is magic and everything we do is ritual. Whether we know it or not, we are all magicians 24 hours a day. We are all either competent or incompetent practitioners of our craft. I have made my ordinary life magic and my life ordinary. Excuse me. I've made my ordinary life magic and my magic life ordinary. The act of putting on my socks is no less magical than the act of invoking Thoth or penetrating the 10th Enochian aether. As a young magician, my daily routine included many of the colorful activities you would expect from a fledgling wizard. Morning and evening ritual work, yoga, pranayama, meditative exercises, experimental spirit evocations, and various kinds of divinatory practice. Tarot, I Ching, geomancy, etc. I had no idea why I was doing these things. I just knew that they were part of the magician's training program and assumed that someday this training would come in handy. Now my days are pretty normal. My wife, Constance, wakes me up by passing a cup of magic potion, hot coffee, under my slumbering nose. After drinking about half of it, I remember who I am and what must be done. The first thing that must be done is to pay the rent and put food on the table. To assure this happens on a regular basis, 5 days a week I perform an extended 9-hour magical ritual. I call it going to work. Holding a real job is one of the 2 most impressive magical feats I've ever accomplished. The most impressive is my blissful 34-year marriage to Constance, which is now 52-year marriage to Constance. People ask me how I find time to write, practice magic, and work full time. To tell you the truth, if I had all day to write, I don't think I would write 1 word more than I do now. I don't think, and I know I wouldn't be able to pay the rent. I'm the type of lazy person that needs to trick himself into believing that I am a competent and productive individual. I need to get up, get dressed, go out into the world and cheerfully mix with people who would burn me at the stake if they knew what I did and what I believed. I need to balance the bizarre world of the magician with what others call objective reality. The normal world helps me to ground my magic, and my magic energizes my normal world. Over the years, I've observed that magicians who are unable to balance these 2 worlds are in very grave danger. First, they lose their sense of humor. Then, they lose their minds. Yesterday was a good example of the contrasts in my life. As I drove to work in my rusty old 1977 Volkswagen camper, I just now drive a 1984 rusty Volkswagen camper. I perform my morning devotions to the Hindu god Ganesha by chanting his holy name 108 times to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel. I honor this god, who is the remover of obstacles, because I look like him. And he continues to arrange that my supervisor doesn't realize that I'm the worst worker in her department. I've written my last 4 books at work. Yesterday morning was pretty typical. I sat at my computer and processed some paperwork and chatted 3 times on the telephone with my publisher. At lunch, I wrote about 400 words of a new book. Then I went back to pushing papers. I know it doesn't sound very magical, does it? The evening was more of what you might expect from a practicing magician. Around 8 p.m., my house filled with local magicians who gathered to help us celebrate the feast of the 3 days of the writing of the Book of the Law. The ceremony began when Constance lit a huge bowl of fire while reciting a lovely enchantment from Crowley's Rite of Mars. I swear by Jean and by Sheen and by the space between that I will not stir from this place until the fire of God hath flamed upon the water that is upon the altar, etc. Then with the flames dancing wildly, I stepped to the altar and celebrated Crowley's Mass of the Phoenix, which entails the act of slashing a certain symbol into my chest with a magical knife. I do this only one night a year. It's very bloody. Everyone seems to love it. Sound more magical? The magazine. It was astonishing for me to read your words. Short as it is, and he's quoting me here, short as it is, Accidental Christ took me a little over 12 years to complete. During that time, I followed the discoveries brought to light by Dead Sea Scroll research. I was repeatedly amazed to learn that many of the elements and background and character that I penned purely from my imagination were in fact verifiable by modern scholarship. That's the end of my quote he's quoting. How can you explain this? Is this intuitive thinking a feature of art in general, or is there something in the human mind that allows people to see things? Was there anything else revealed during your writing experience? Could the process of writing be a tool that helps us learn about reality? Here's my answer. Oh, I absolutely believe that writing is an excellent medicine for the mind and soul. The writer is required to reduce things to their essence and deal with them on the spot, exactly what a magician does when he or she evokes a spirit. I think that's very good for one's mental health. I don't think I was channeling anything or anyone more mysterious than myself when I wrote Accidental Christ. At times I was simply a bit more awake to what should have been obvious to scholars and theologians of the past had they been armed with a better understanding of the political and social and religious reality of first-century Palestine. The magazine then asked, what do you think about Aleister Crowley's literary talent? My answer, it was immense. His output was absolutely astounding. People often make fun of his poetry because it's so esoteric and often so shocking. As for his novels, well, I don't know if I'm an objective critic when it comes to his novels. Let me ask you something. Have you ever read a novel written by someone you knew very well? A good friend or a relative? If you have, I bet that it was very difficult for you to enjoy, because you know the creator so well that it's almost impossible to suspend your disbelief. That's how I feel about Crowley's Moonchild or Diary of a Drug Fiend. If I didn't know so much about Crowley, these books might be very engaging. As it is, I can't help but second-guess his motives, and I feel the embarrassment that a close friend might feel who is confronted with his comrade's literary pretensions. Does that make any sense? I believe Crowley's best works are his Class A holy books. These are a class of spiritual literature comparable only to Blake, Ezekiel, or John. They can't be analyzed by the intellect. They're word pictures, images morphing like a Brownian movement into other images. These works are Crowley at his best, although he did not take credit for writing them. The magazine asks me, what brought you into literature? Literature. That's a little scary to hear my work being called literature. In my early 40s, I more or less woke up to the fact that there might be other people who were interested in what I consider the most important things in life. Things that, because of my passion for magic, I knew a little something about. In 1988, my good friend Christopher Hyatt was kind enough to ask me to write an epilogue to his book, Secrets of Western Tantra. That was the first thing I ever had published. We discovered that we worked very well together, and he generously asked if I would be interested in co-authoring a book about sex magic, tarot, and the Holy Guardian Angel. I said, sure. We didn't stop there. In the next 2 years, he and I co-authored 4 books that I'm happy to say have been very well received. The magazine then asked, would you like to write something else similar to Accidental Christ? My answer, there appears to be some interest in having Accidental Christ turned into a motion picture. I'll believe that when I see it. I'm still waiting. Nevertheless, to placate certain friends, I've promised to produce a screenplay adaptation. If I really believed that I had enough time left, I would love to write an expose on Paul. I really don't like that guy. What are your plans, is the next question. My new book, The Chicken Kabbalah, My new book, The Chicken Kabbalah of Rabbi Lamed Ben Clifford, will be out this summer, and I'm well into the next book. I've been asked not to comment on that one quite yet. In August, I'll be traveling to Oslo and London and teaching at the Omega Institute in New York. The magazine, and I like this question. Do you think your knowledge of sex magic could help you write a good pornographic novel? Probably not. Sex magic is highly erotic, but the magic takes place on internal planes of consciousness. I'm afraid that a viable sex magic novel would not capture the imagination of an avid fan of pornography, and that a commercially viable pornographic novel would disappoint serious students of magic. But, the magazine asks, does this knowledge help you in your personal life? I love sex. I love magic. This knowledge is my personal life. Perhaps it helps. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes it doesn't. Got out of that one. The magazine. How do historical discoveries and research similar to the Dead Sea Scrolls findings influence magic? What kind of interaction could be between technology and magic in the future? These are excellent questions. Every new discovery, historical, astronomical, medical, mathematical, or scientific, changes humanity and the magical formula that help us get things done. Crowley's new Aeon of Horus will not be a new Aeon forever. Every new discovery mutates who we are, what we are. Just think about how different our lives are from those of our parents or their parents. My grandfather rode a horse and defecated in a hole in the ground. His community had no electricity, no indoor plumbing, no telephones, no airplanes, no Pluto, no black holes, no DNA. It's impossible to talk to my mother about religion or magic. Not because she's stupid, but because we come from two different worlds. The same will hold true with the next generation of magicians, who will arm themselves with tools of biotechnology to instantly induce levels of consciousness we old wizards had to struggle to comprehend and achieve. Yes, I think the magic of the future, perhaps in the very near future, will be incomprehensibly magnificent. And that's the end of that interview. And tomorrow we'll pick up with an interview I did in 2010 with Star Foster. Star, if you're watching this is our interview. And it was done for Pathos.com. It's a very knowledgeable interviewer and a very prestigious format. So it will be my interview, America's Occultist, the interview with Lon Milo DuQuette. So in the meantime, I'm going to enjoy a special birthday breakfast with Constance, and she's promised not to be mean to me today, just one day a year. She's never mean to me. And I'll see you tomorrow. Until tomorrow, enjoy your weekend. And in doing so, be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. Happy my birthday.